Welcome to the Talk About, something to talk about at the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center, which is sponsored by Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island. Fieldstone offers assisted and independent care along with vibrant memory care community located on the tranquil Rolling Bay campus. They also include day stay and respite care programs. Call 206-594-1010 or email Ashley, ASHLEYC at fieldstonecommunities.com and check out our website at fieldstonecommunities.com or come by for a tour today. And we'd also like to acknowledge that we meet on the ancestral homeland of the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water. The Suquamish have lived on the water of the Salish Sea since time immemorial. We honor them and are learning from their stewardship of these lands and water. Today, David Harrison, founder of the Northwest Policy Center at the University of Washington, joins us to analyze the national political landscape. Welcome, David.
Thank you. So in the notice that Reed sent out, we talking about polls, and we were talking about polls and not real live voting polls like happened on Tuesday. So we'll add Tuesday's events to our report, which will go something like this. We'll start on polls and then talk a little bit about Trump's trials, and then end up with a dialogue on whether the government's going to close down or not next week. So that's the plan. We start with a moment of regret because a distinguished elected official is not running for re-election. And I don't mean Joe Manchin. Derek Kilmer announced that he's not going to run for re-election, which is sad, sad, sad. He's 49. He's got time for another career. He could have been the Norm Dixon story and just keep on getting elected and finally you're chair of appropriations or something, but he did not choose that path. I don't know who's gonna, that's a fairly safe seat. It's not an automatic seat, but I don't know who wants it and whether Christine does now that she's over as a county commissioner. I guess we'll find out soon who's gonna jump in. But it's too bad because you're not gonna find a better member of Congress than Derek Kilmer, I'm sure. I've met 100 or so, and you're not going to. So let's start by talking about the polls and polling. What happened on Tuesday is very interesting. It's not true that candidates who have minority positions always pay at the ballot box. For instance, in the last 20 or 30 years, Republican tax policy has robbed from the poor to pay the rich. It's reverse Robin Hood tax legislation. And there's no evidence that Republican candidates have suffered for that. There's overwhelming evidence that they're suffering for a minority position on choice. It's interesting because this isn't something that they're happy to have succeeded in reducing choice, but it's a position of principle. You might disagree with it, but they're not being wily or anything. They're just marching down behind their beliefs that our choice should be limited. But at any rate, ever since the Dobbs decision, they've been paying, and the evidence is they'll continue to pay. So there's several things that happened on Tuesday that would not have happened were it not for choice. First, of course, the initiative in Ohio, which creates a new constitutional amendment that protects choice in Ohio, which is commonly thought of as a red state, but hopefully we can use choice to make back into the purple state it has been in the past, with people as like Dick Celeste as governor and John Glenn as senator. So in addition to that, Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, pretty much staked the strength of his political future on winning back the Senate, Virginia State Senate, and winning and saving his majority position in the House. As you've heard me mention, Youngkin has been considering leaping into the 2024 race if Trump looked like he was in a bunch of trouble and people weren't deciding between Haley and DeSantis. That's all gone away now that he lost both Senate and House because of choice. He's not going to try and do that in 2024. So perversely, it's a big plus for Nikki Haley that Youngkin suffered a blow. And interestingly, it saved the governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, who's the choice vote made the attorney general got 48% of the vote. He would have been successful were it not for the issue of choice. So it's pretty significant. We should think about that, what that means for the future, of course. It's a gift that's going to keep on giving. There hasn't been a diminution of the extent to which it's been an advantage. We've now run seven or eight statewide votes on it, and it's good for us to think of when it's to the greatest advantage. So the first thing to say about that is that it's to our greatest advantage when choice itself is on the ballot as an initiative or referendum. And it's valuable if in a state the legislature and the governor have been warring or trying to do something new to restrict choice, which is true in several states post-Dobbs. So when that's happening, it brings our voters out that much more. Thirdly, of course, if there's a recent action by the court, by the state court. And fourth, every Democratic candidate benefits in some way because we get more people at the polls because choice is a motivating issue to them. But the number one standard is we would want to have an initiative in every state where an initiative is possible. That's only 26 states. And in 23 of the others, the legislature can vote to put something up before the public, which is what happened in Nebraska when they lost. They had served up a constitutional amendment and we kicked their butts. So that's the way to think about it. And in that light, it's important to note that of the 12 states where people are gathering signatures to have choice be on the ballot a year from now, 4 are swing states. So that's important because it helps us win those electoral votes in a presidential race and helps us, our senator candidate, win if there's anybody up. So those 4 states of special interest where there's initiative campaigns, signatures being gathered right now are Arizona, Nevada, Florida, and Pennsylvania. I would not discount Florida as a possibility of winning electoral votes. We keep on getting killed by Cuban Americans in Miami who are resolute Republicans, but something that could bring another 5% to the polls could be interesting, especially since DeSantis did not beat Charlie Crist was the candidate, and Floridians think Charlie Crist was washed up, was done, and he was. So that didn't help us. So what we're thinking is we've got to keep on taking advantage of choice, and we're understanding now to the other polls that it's not sufficient for us to feel very comfortable about the 2024 presidential race or about keeping the Senate now that Joe Manchin has decided that he's not going to run for re-election. It's important to note that he was in trouble. The governor was running against him, and Manchin was down in the polls, but because it's a solid red state. So in the midst of it, we had some New York Times polls showing Biden behind Trump in swing states. I wouldn't make much of a deal of that. I think it's two other things about the polls, because it's just way too far away, and Trump is still going to suffer some guilty findings. He's going to be guilty of some things that make him a felon. There are some things in all these polls that are interesting. It's not that Biden's performance polls negative. In the last 20 years, the president has polled negative 16 out of those 20 years. It's a common thing. It's that Americans are not letting go, even as inflation gets lower, they're not letting go of how they feel about the economy. It's interesting. We got 13 or 14 million new jobs, but Americans who have a job or who are retired are not fixed on who got a new job. They're fixed on how much they pay for gas or groceries or such. So I think the evidence is pretty significant that not only have they not let that go in terms of blaming Joe for that, that they're not gonna. So that's a problematic thing for us, because Americans vote their pocketbook a lot, and so for some reason they've decided Trump is better for them on the economy than Joe is. So the other thing that isn't going to go away is age. You've got 50% or so of Democrats continuing to mention that they wish that Joe wouldn't run. What Joe is banking on is that the antipathy to Trump, or even to MAGA, is more pronounced than the antipathy to him. So obviously he's got a great record to run on as far as we're concerned. He's banking that those negative feelings will be overwhelmed by the quality of the opposition. I hate this. I as you know, I'd run Gretchen Whitmer at a microsecond. David Brooks had a very long column on how he comes down thinking that Joe should run. I think he's wrong. His primary argument is worth thinking about, and that is that there is not enough time for another Democratic candidate to establish themselves. I don't think that's true. Obama wasn't in the lead a year before he won, and Bill Clinton wasn't, and Jack Kennedy wasn't. So I just don't. Jimmy Carter wasn't. We've had hardly anybody win the presidency in the last 40 years that was in the lead with a year left. So I just don't think that's true. It bears mentioning that Joe Manchin might be interested in running for president. So as you know, this is all about no labels. No labels has already figured out how they're going to get on the ballot in 12 states, even though they don't have a ticket yet. But No Labels has been saying that they want a Republican to lead the ticket. That's because No Labels doesn't want to hand the election to Donald Trump. They don't want to hand it to Joe Biden either. So they think they'd be better off running Republican. The joke on that is Larry Hogan or John Huntsman, two Republican governors who are interested, don't have a lot of ability to attract votes away from Trump. I think they're more likely to attract votes away from us. So I continue to be concerned about No Labels. It could be a Hogan Manchin ticket. That would be interesting, but scary for us. All of a sudden we could, it's interesting though, because if that ticket won 80 electoral votes and nobody won the presidency and the election, it would go to the House of Representatives. And then all we'd have to do to win the presidency is win the majority in the House. And maybe that's why Hakeem Jeffries is so intent on making House Republicans look like fools, because maybe, well, it'd be enough to win back the House, but it could be consequential if there's a no labels ticket that gets any electoral votes at all. In the meantime, Dean Phillips, Congressman from Minnesota, wants to run. I have been surprised at how little attention anybody has paid to that, which is not good for him. But let the record show that Joe Biden is not going to be on the ballot in New Hampshire unless something happens. New Hampshire has violated the Democratic Party rules. Democratic Party wants to lead with South Carolina. New Hampshire's not happy. Dean Phillips is running in New Hampshire, and Joe Biden won't be on the ballot. That's not a great way to start if you're Joe Biden. So it's Larry Hogan or John Huntsman, Joe Manchin, Dean Phillips, and of course, whoever is going to finish second for now in Iowa and New Hampshire in the Republican primary. So if that's Nikki Haley's strategy, is to eventually have Ramaswamy and Christie and Tim Scott yield to her, and to get a high enough number in March while Trump's being handcuffed to have it matter. And of course, there's a lot of people in the Republican Party who openly or secretly don't like Trump. So that's her strategy. And she is getting a little traction. DeSantis has the same strategy, of course. And what he's got is the endorsement of the popular governor of Iowa. So they're running for second place with all they can. There is no other candidate now that Youngkin's out of play, who has any chance. Tim Scott has not caught on. We didn't know Mike Pence was running when he withdrew from the race. It's too bad for him, but considering he might be a somewhat honorable man. So that's where we stand. We should still want Joe Biden to withdraw. We should still want there to be new candidates on the Democratic side. And as for me, I want Nikki Haley to be strong, because if we don't win the presidency, I want it to be somebody on that side who understands there's a constitution. So that's my feeling. I'm stopping so we can talk about what happened Tuesday or anything on the matters I just spoke to.
Anyone? Sheila.
Yes. David, can I talk to you about the more about what happened here, or what the people withdrawing in this area in Kitsap?
People withdrawing.
Okay, so Derek Kilmer, of course, is withdrawing is going to not run again. Yeah. I think he's going to run for governor. And the second thing is Hilary Franz is going to run for Congress. I think she announced that.
Wow.
She withdrew from the gubernatorial race, and I think I read somewhere that today. Yeah, it seems to me I read that today that she's running for she's running for Congress, and that would be logical. That would be Kilmer's place.
Well, I didn't know she did that. Bob Ferguson was about to beat her. Derek Kilmer not running is a great gift to Hilary Franz, because sure, she lives in our part of the district, 23rd, but at least that's given her some name recognition in the rest of the our congressional district. So that probably means that now that Christine's over county commissioner, that she doesn't have interest. It could mean it's possible that Derek told Hilary ahead of time, but I don't know that they know each other that well. Everybody knows everybody down there. I think she's a great candidate for the House, and it's a gift for her because she wasn't going to beat Ferguson. The only part you said that I disagree with is I don't think Kilmer would beat Ferguson either.
Well,
Derek doesn't have a statewide reputation.
This is why I was really concerned about Derek going, but that was in my head that was where he was going to go. He's not announced what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't he run against Ferguson, Madeline?
I heard on the radio from NPR that Hilary has been endorsed by Derek Kilmer.
Well,
she announced at 10:44 this morning that she's running for Congress.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the new information from Madeline is that Derek endorsed her, which means he talked to her in advance to fix.
Right.
You know, back when Derek ran, I called Christine and said, "Jump in." She said, "It's going to be Derek." It was all worked out when Norm Dix retired, and so that's what happened here. The only place that our dear Sheila is wrong is Derek's not going to run against against Bob Ferguson for the reason that he would lose. It's very hard.
Yeah.
Jay Inslee is the exception. It's hard for a congressman from a single district to win statewide. Jim McDermott, it goes back over the years. It's hard to do, and I don't think he would do that. It would get him closer to his kids. I believe him. I think he said, "I'm 49. I have time for another career. I have children that I've been missing." Tom Kilbane will settle this controversy.
Yes. Come on, Tom.
I think Derek would have talked with Christine before, and she would have known that this was coming. So I doubt it. If she's interested. And I met Derek, and I'm sure you did too, but before he ran, when he was still a councilman, and he really, he was impressive. He really knew what he was doing. But and I think it's very logical for Hilary to get out of the race for governor, because, as you point out, she's not going to win it. And she has a much better chance right now. She'd have to be considered the front runner for the congressional seat.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
I knew Derek when he was in Olympia, and he was always a favorite. I always favor people who have both heart and brains and are not so obsessed with the political side of the office that they forget the policy side. And so him being a Rhodes Scholar or whatever certainly was a factor, but he's a great guy.
He is.
I meant to say, I have to go back to Choice for a second. In 1981, I took the Republican governor of Michigan to the big gala of Planned Parenthood so he could receive the Margaret Sanger Award for the best battler for choice in the country, because he had been a pro-choice governor. And I don't think now you could name a pro-choice Republican. So that's actually good for us to have those folks be shoved out.
Who was that? Was that Romney?
No, Bill Milliken.
Milliken
was my mentor. He was Romney's lieutenant governor, and then served 12 years on his own. Wow. I knew George Romney a little bit. Mitt is back to saying his hero was his father, but he sure didn't show it when he was running for president. Right. George Romney was a Dan Evans governor.
Are you still going for Gretchen?
Pardon?
Are you still going for Gretchen?
Yeah, I don't think she's heard me though. So let's move on if you're ready. So that's all, a lot of exciting new things. So we, as you know, those of you who follow it, we also have a new state legislature who's 35, who's Greg Dance. That's a good choice.
Oh, yeah.
He's not a veteran political person, but he's as earnest and knowledgeable and energetic as you would want. So that's a good thing. Tom wanted us to talk about Trump's trials, and he worded it. Reed, did I say Tom? Reed wanted us to talk about it, and in the context that maybe there haven't been any tribulations, which means damage and dismay. There has been already. When you follow Enrigan, the judge, this is a bench trial for a fraud in New York, and under the New York court system, a trial judge in a bench trial has extraordinary powers to make findings of fact. And as some of you know, on the 7 fraud charges, the judge has already ruled that one of them demonstrates fraudulent behavior by Trump. The interesting thing is, this guy's state Supreme Court judge, they have districts and they are not the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, the rules that to which an appeal would be directed, is an appellate court that is above him. The interesting thing is couple-fold. First, I think it's obvious that the judge is going to levy a $250 million fine. The interesting thing is he is going to remove Trump's business license, force the dissembling of some of Trump's empire. And the issue would be, when he does that, he's already discounted the claim that the bankers who were defrauded weren't defrauded because they didn't lose money because the loan was paid back. The judge has already rejected that as an argument, because the finding of fraud has to go to whether it's a fraudulent statement, not whether it was a successfully fraudulent statement. And it was successfully, because those banks made less money because of the fraud. At any rate, Enrigan's going to, by December, just nail Trump. And the issue is that doesn't make it a felony. It's a civil fraud case, but it makes it extremely painful, very costly to Trump in the thing he loves the most, which is money. The thing to think about would be whether it's appealable, and whether the U.S. Supreme Court could overrule. It goes to the New York State Appellate Court, which has 7 judges, all appointed by the governor. This is 7 people that Andrew Cuomo or Kathy Hochul liked. And I don't know what the grounds for appeal would be. I mean, New York State can decide what fraud is. I don't know whether the U.S. Supreme Court would hear that case if the penalties for fraud are executed by Enrigan. So I think it's a scary time for Trump. That's why he's so bad, I think. The rest of the story, of course, in terms of tribulation, there's been a thing on Fox and other places that Trump's lawyers have made a mistake and that they could have had a jury trial. Enrigan has cleared that up. It's not true. In a trial that's not about penalties and damages, but it instead is about what Enrigan calls equality, the awarding of damages is more complex. And the judge under New York state law can decide himself that there's not going to be a jury, which he would have done. And so Trump's attorneys are off the hook. They didn't fail to check a box that could have gotten them a trial by jury. That was always Hedrigan's decision. And the other day he cleared that up. So what else is happening? As you know, Mark Meadows has already testified against Trump in the Jack Smith side of things, though not in Georgia. People, including Sidney Powell and Chesbrough, have turned state evidence in Georgia. And between January and May, you've got a ton of things happening. E. Jean Carroll is back for another defamation round in January. The other trials in Georgia will proceed, and they'll get more people pleading guilty and staying out of jail by pleading guilty. That, of course, is the benefit of charging 19 people, because when you charge them, the grand jury allows them to be charged. That means you've got more leverage to them for them to testify against Trump, which is what they're going to do. So Trump's in deep trouble in Georgia. They're after him. And then in short order, the election interference trial is scheduled for March. Stormy Daniels is back with us in March. And President likely election interference, I mean the false electors, the Jack Smith false electors is in March, and the Jack Smith classified documents, which will be in Florida, is in May. So you see, Trump has no chance of slipping all these dates, which he's trying to do. The charges were filed early enough, so they're going to run out of motions and have to do the trials right when the early primaries are being held. And every one of them is a good shot. The weakest case, of course, is Alvin Bragg's charges with regard to Stormy Daniels and federal election law, state election law. Everything else, pretty strong case. So I think the pain will be, a lot of people thought it was endless waiting to see what he would be charged with. Now they think it's endless to wait for the trials, but we're in excellent shape. It is a falsehood that all this makes Trump stronger. It might make him stronger with a certain branch of MAGA supporters who were always going to stay with him, and who by definition are insufficient to win in the election. Reason why DeSantis, Nikki Haley are saying he's brought us loss after loss is because he has. And the reason why that is the very strategy he employs to keep MAGA with him is anathema to independent voters. So that's why they're not scrambling in the Republican Party because they don't like him, which they don't, because he took over their party and killed it. They're scrambling because they think he's not going to win. And that's because he's anathema to independents. And that's what Joe thinks too. Joe thinks, oh, they may hate me over inflation, but they don't. They think Trump is a bombastic, criminal, liar, an awful person. Right. So what do you think about that? That's it on lawsuits. My theory is that the tribulations will ensue, that further delays in the trials won't happen, that most of it will play out between December of this year and May of next year, and that it will be incredibly disadvantageous for Trump in terms of trying to run his campaign. And eventually the danger of being jailed for a felony is very real.
Mm-hmm.
You think he is going to be going to jail?
Well, I hope not. I mean, if I was the judge and he wasn't running for president, I'd give him probation for the rest of his life. I don't myself enjoy elected officials being locked up, but I certainly want him to not be the candidate, or if he is the candidate, to not be elected, obviously. There's even DeSantis knows that there's a constitution. Trump was asked yesterday if he would go after his enemies,
Yeah.
if he controlled the Justice Department. And what you're supposed to say is, no, I would follow my oath of office, and I would not use the Justice Department as a tool to persecute and prosecute my enemies. And he said, yes, of course I would. That's what they're doing to me. So that's the wrong answer.
Well, he's an authoritarian. Come on. And, I just listened to Heather Cox Richardson, and she said something about, the people that are sticking with Trump. And it was an interesting quote. She said, the more outrageous an authoritarian becomes, the tighter his followers cling to him because they cannot look at themselves as being wrong. People that cannot say, yeah, I made a mistake following this guy. And there's a certain amount of humanity that can't. So what they do is they cling even tighter to that authoritarian.
And so every new charge brings an affirmation that we're out to get him and such. Remember that Murdoch created that castle.
Christina.
I'm just going to jump on that. I am listening to Cassidy Hutchinson's book. I'm sorry, that White House was crazy. And there were loyalty oaths, she says, loyalty purges. Now, this is one experience, but she's proven herself to be pretty credible. And so what you were saying is true. It was just like this really crazy. And the more that outrageous he became, the more people sort of closed in and needed to feel like they needed to be more loyal to him. It's insane. So listen to Cassidy Hutchinson's book. It's creepy. It's creepy.
Yeah.
Another creepy book, of course, is Mark Milley talking about the national security implications of what Trump wanted to do. When you get a joint chiefs of staff chair who's calling the Chinese and saying, I promise we're not attacking you in the next week. I think.
I mean, it's such scary, incredibly scary stuff that's happening.
There's the Washington side of the story, because when Mark Milley started talking behind the scenes with Democrats about what they were doing to protect the Pentagon from the president, Schumer and some other Democrats were very distrustful of Milley, because he had appeared on front of the church in uniform with Trump.
Yeah.
And it was Adam Smith, our congressman, who's chair of armed services, who worked very hard to get them to pay some attention to Milley.
Mm-hmm.
So our last topic, I'm sorry about my cough. 2 hours ago, I tested negative for COVID. I just got back from Panama with COVID. And then my sweetie just came in right before we were starting and saying, she looked down at the testing strip and there is still a little red line. So that means I can't go see my grandchildren tomorrow.
Oh, bless it.
So now we're talking about Speaker Mike Thompson and how we're going to keep the government open. So when I started thinking about this, I was remembering two things that Mike Thompson and his caucus want. One is, as you know, he already passed a $13 billion aid bill for Israel, and they want aid for Israel. And he took the unusual step of funding it with $14 billion worth of IRS cuts, which the Congressional Budget Office pointed out would actually cause a decrease in federal revenue rather than a savings because in expenditures, because those IRS agents find money that people owe and get them to pay it. So that's not going to happen. But the other thing that Mike Thompson wants that Biden is flexible on is more money on the border. So that's politically valuable for Biden because Democrats and Republicans are worried about the border. So eventually there'll be a solution on the narrower issue of Israel and Ukraine, and that looks something like this. All the money that Biden wants to give to Israel with almost no strings attached. Whatever funding to rebuild Gaza would not be in the bill. It would never pass, but they'll eventually put money into rebuilding Gaza. Money for Ukraine with more strings attached than it's had in the past. So Mike Thompson has already said that he's going to let through money for Ukraine, which he has to say because the Senate won't pass a bill without money for Ukraine. And then the way to get Mike Thompson a claim of something that he wants would be additional money for border protection. So it'll be something like that on those special issues. But that doesn't tell you how the government's going to stay open because that's all in the offing. Might even not be a part of the settlement. Might be kicked down a couple weeks. So what Mike Thompson wants is a two-tiered continuing resolution that would have some of the appropriations bills get done by December and some more in January, and have a continuing resolution until then to those 2 points. That is, it would last for defense and a couple other bills. There's 12 appropriations bills, and it would last till December for defense and some others, and then till January for some others. That's not hugely far away from what Schumer and McConnell would agree to. All these discussions in the Senate have been done in a bipartisan fashion, and none of them in the House. So there's so far, no Democrats crossing over and voting for appropriations bills because they're loaded with poison. So that's the issue. If Mike Thompson comes out this weekend and says, I'm going to have a clean continuing resolution with no Republican points to be scored so that we can get on with our business and pass bills in December and January, then we're not that far away from keeping it open. However, it's not clear that Mike Thompson has the votes to do that. He can only lose 5 votes, and whether, since he's the new speaker, they'll let him do a clean continuing resolution is the issue. And I predict that they will. We'll see. There were some bad signs for him yesterday. Back when I worked in DC, the easiest appropriations bill was transportation and housing and urban development. And he tried to move that on the floor yesterday. And some Northeast Republican congressmen who didn't like the Amtrak cuts blocked it. So, and then he tried to move general government, and there was a dispute between one set of anti-abortion forces and another set of anti-abortion forces. So he couldn't get the votes for that either. This is not promising. But the issue is whether they'll wait till December and January to have their huge battles. It would just put them off. So eventually we'll get back to what I've always said about how you resolve government closings. You let the market get killed by 10% over a couple of weeks, and then wealthy people and companies say, please stop this. This hurts. We don't like it. And then you muster enough Republican votes for passage. The issue is to have such a slim majority, it's harder to get that sort of resolution unless you do what Kevin McCarthy does, which is get 80 Republican votes. And what happened to him for doing that, that's why he's not speaker. So it should be interesting, but you will see, I think the government will not close next week. I think Republicans get it that they always get blamed. And they should always get blamed because they're the ones doing it. But I think they got a lesson from when Ted Cruz closed the government. They're worried about the 10 or so Republican congressmen or women who were elected in Biden districts, and they think that this would hurt them. So that's, if we get a continuing resolution and we don't close the government, it will be because they're worried about losing their majority. And meanwhile, of course, that's what Hakeem Jeffries is emphasizing. So that's what's happening on keeping the government open. Remember that the only fix is Mike Thompson's got to be able to say to his caucus eventually, whether it's in January, December, or now, that he got something, and it isn't going to be cutting IRS. They wouldn't be willing to do that. It would be, it'll be increased conditions on Ukraine and more border support.
Mhm.
I just would remind us before we close, to this day, you can go to DC, go into a committee markup and see civil behavior and serious legislating on a bipartisan basis on 60% of what they're doing. J.D. Vance said the biggest surprise to him is how little people hate people, how little of that is really going on. So a lot of this is ritualistic, but I must say there are more, as Derek said, there are more members there who are sworn not to work with the other party than there have been in the past, and that's why we have to continue to work on more swing seats and redistricting and in other ways so that there'll be 100 swing seats rather than 40.
Yeah. Oh, man. Still bummed about Derek.
America will be here in the future.
I hope so.
There are good people in government, one less now that Derek's not going to do it.
And Christine, or I mean, Hillary is incredible. I love Hillary. I think
she'll be a good member of Congress.
Yeah,
I'm very pleased to hear that she's doing that.
Right.
Well, I think what she would do is she would continue in the footsteps of Derek Kilmer.
Oh, yeah.
And the one thing about Kilmer is his bipartisan group that he gets together, the 12 of them, 6 Republicans and 6 Democrats, and they sit down and they talk about it. They don't talk about things. They don't yell at each other. They talk about things. They hear Derek talk. I remember way back when, just sitting and, a couple of us, 3 or 4 people, and Derek talking about this group of people that he works with. And he was just thrilled with it, and I would think that Hillary would just fit right in there.
I think for the most part, if there is a Problem Solvers Caucus going forward, that would be a good thing for her to do. But I don't think it's as deep in her bones as it is in Derek's. I mean, that's the way Derek did Olympia too. And you'll know from the beginning that we knew from the beginning Derek was a Democrat. I don't know I don't know what will be her number one agenda, but I think you're right that she would absolutely be willing and able to work across the aisle. Aisle's got to be there to work across. You can't work with people who won't work with you. Yeah. And that caucus is split. There's 100 Republicans who still want to work with Democrats. What we need to do most of all is put back the House, and our chances are good. With Manchin not running, our chances of saving ourselves in the Senate are problematic. I think, maybe Tom agrees, that Sherrod Brown will win. Depends on what kind of year we're having other than that. And Tester's up in Montana. That's a hard one. On the other hand, if anybody can win re-election in Montana as a Democrat, it'd be Tester.
Yeah.
We got 8 or 9 other seats up. You have to worry about us losing the seat in Arizona, depending on who the Republicans run, with Sinema not running as a Democrat. That's Ruben Gallego, who's working so hard right now. That's interesting, but we could definitely lose Arizona.
Tom?
Just a point of information, Brown has been a very, very popular name in Ohio state politics. There have been Republicans and Democrats elected, state secretary of state, governor, and so that's going to help Sherrod. Plus, Sherrod is very, very popular, and this will get out the vote. I definitely think he's a winner.
It's too bad he wasn't up for re-election last Tuesday.
Yeah.
That's really, they are really energized in Ohio. The other thing, information is Christine was planning originally, before she did the commissioner thing, she was going to run for Hilary's seat.
Really?
That would give her statewide recognition.
Yeah.
And so I was, she told me that.
Yeah. And she had flirted with that the last time.
I was surprised. And one last comment, thinking about Trump has a ceiling, in the electorate. So it's not the worst thing that could happen if he actually ran, because I don't see, he can't win, and he would hurt the rest of the ticket.
Well, I think in a perverse way, we should hope that he's the candidate, because of all the candidates, including DeSantis, he has less opportunity to get independent voters. The reason why we wouldn't feel that way is the risk to our country is too great.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we wouldn't feel that way. And we should feel that way in that Nikki Haley's got a better chance of beating Joe Biden or Whitmer or Klobuchar than Trump does. I'm just saying I'm a little worried for our nation. So I'd like to have Republican candidates who are against insurrection.
Yeah.
You think?
That's my strong preference.
Nikki Haley worries me, because I think she could get elected.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely that's one reason for Joe to decide in the next. Oh, you notice that David Axelrod dropped a little dime on Joe with regard to reconsidering. So,
oh, really?
He wouldn't have done that without chatting up.
Yeah.
You said that Axelrod is running for president?
Yeah, no, I said Axelrod said that it's time for Joe to think it over one more time.
Yeah.
And it's not too late, right, David?
That's my view. As I said, name a Democratic president who was the sure thing candidate a year before the election.
Yeah, you're right.
It's
Kennedy, Carter, Clinton, Obama, none of them.
I mean, good grief, nobody knew Obama's name by this time.
Yeah.
Well, I think Christina did.
Yeah, I think Christina. But I have to say, that's why we keep having you come back month to month, David, because you keep us in chronological order of what happened, history, that you have to remind of us, so we don't feel like we're falling off a cliff, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, it's a fun thing for me, and it's a nice compliment to my blog, which I still do, which goes to 1,000 or so people, and
yes,
so that's my hobby, and I'm happy to do it.
I just wanted to chime in some, but I read something yesterday. Kristen Sinema hasn't said she's running.
Yeah, which would be a real help. She stays out, and it's just head to head against with Gallego running against somebody like Carrie Lake, then we'll win again.
Yeah.
Which
So,
would be nice.
there's that.
Yep. Check this
So-
space every month. Check this
The-
space because, you know, we have.
There's hope for America. Let's not get too depressed. We can do this.
Yes, absolutely.
We've been doing it ever since he won in 2016. We can continue to do it.
Yes. Okay, well,
See you
listen,
next month.
thank you, David, and
Thank
thanks,
you.
everybody. Bye-bye.